everyone, my name is Felicia. I'm a student at Launch School, and today I'm super excited because I get to sit down and talk with Chris Lee. He's co-founder and instructor at Launch School. So he's just going to be chatting with me about Launch School, about the software engineering field, and about himself too. And I'm really excited to get to do this. So hi, Chris. Thank you for doing this with me.
Hey, yeah, great to be here. Thanks for inviting me, and big fan of all your videos that you're making. They are so good and so professional, I have to say.
Thank you.
Very nicely done. So very happy and excited to be here.
Thanks. Yeah, I love interviewing people. I like getting to know the people at Launch School, and super excited for this one because I get to learn. We all get to learn from you. Okay, so my first question for Chris is, what gave you the idea to start a school, an online school for software engineering?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a really good origin story. And I used to get that question so much that I wrote a blog post about it. And I'll just mention it right now. If you search medium.com for from bootcamp to mastery, you'll find this article I wrote, gosh, like 4 years ago, 2018.
Wow.
Probably need to write a part two to that article now. But that's our origin story, because we've been teaching people to code since the end of 2012. So that's so by the end of this year,
10
this is gonna be
years.
10 years. It's been a long time. I've never done anything for 10 years. So it's and I never thought I would, frankly. I'm one of those sort of people who jumped around a lot, wanted to do a lot of different things, but this has stuck for me, and I never thought I would do anything for 10 years. And I also never thought it would be like teaching people to code. Like, that was not on my radar ever. Even when we started teaching people to code, there was a motivation to learn how to teach in order to build a product for educators. And teaching itself wasn't necessarily the goal when we first started. But I think, as with many interesting companies that start, you go in one direction and then you realize such tremendous market forces just kind of pushing you along. There's that, I go to like a lot of startup or small business workshops or things like that, right? Videos and in the years before. And one of the things I always ask you to look for is, like, when people are throwing money at you, you found something. And that's the position we found ourselves in. So from day one, people wanted to pay us money to learn. And we literally had to say no. And people were willing to pay $100, $1,000, whatever. And they wanted to learn software development from experienced software engineers. And so, like, in 2012, at the end of 2012, I had 10 years of software engineering experience. I was an engineering manager in Silicon Valley, in San Francisco at the time. And so pretty easy to get people to pay money to participate in training. So I think it was accidental, but it was one of those things that we just kept going, kept pulling that thread, kept exploring without backing out of it, probing for sort of the depth. Like, it's a problem you want to try to figure out, right? And I feel like it wasn't until Launch School, and frankly, Launch School was a hypothesis in 2016, early 2016, late 2015, right? So 3 years after starting teaching people code, we arrived on Launch School's model through just trial and error. But even Launch School at that stage was a hypothesis. I would say it's not until fairly recently, like maybe a year or 2 years ago, so 2020-ish, where I really felt like, okay, we got this. Like, this is not that we've cracked like the education problem or anything like that, but we've certainly cracked it for a certain type of student, let's say, right? With a certain type of goal. So So I feel good about where we're at, and that's sort of like the high level, 30,000 foot about why we started. It was literally something that an activity we were doing in order to do something else,
Mhm.
but this activity just took all our energy and time, and 10 years later, here we are.
Wow, it's amazing.
Yeah, I have a lot of more details that I didn't cover that's in that article about all the various experiments we ran, like every type of teaching modality that you can think of, we probably did, from synchronous courses, part-time synchronous courses, full-time synchronous courses, asynchronous courses. I mean, we tried, almost every single model and arrived at what you see today at
Wow.
Launch School, sort of this two segments of mastery-based learning, async, bottom-up mastery-based learning with core, and then top-down synchronous with capstone at the end.
Wow.
It's not a intuitive thing to arrive at, I guess.
No, yeah, it took literally a decade for you guys to figure out this formula to
Exactly.
arrive at what we have now. That's amazing. Okay, so Launch School itself took a few years to become what it is now. But before it was actually Launch School, it was called the Tea Leaf Academy. So it was still a school for software engineers that was kind of morphing into what Launch School is now.
Yeah, so Tea Leaf Academy was a program that we had prior to Launch School. So 2013 to 2015, something like that, the end of 2015, end of 2000, and we even had a thing before 2013, before Tea Leaf Academy, where, we were just kind of experimenting and seeing what people wanted to learn and what we could teach. So Tea Leaf Academy was a result of that prior research and experimentation in teaching people. And Tea Leaf Academy was great. It was 3 courses, and people were getting 6-figure jobs out of it.
Wow.
But what we noticed was there were people who could finish that 3-course sequence that didn't know some basic things, and that was alarming. We didn't have assessments, so we created those courses in what we thought at the time to be a very, very good, smooth ramp-up process to all these advanced topics that people were clamoring for. Because what people would do is they would look at job postings, and then they would say, these are the things we want to learn, right? And so they would list all the job posting topics, TDD, APIs, et cetera, et cetera. And so we were like, yeah, we can teach that, no problem, right? Because again, I had 10 years of experience at that point. So all these topics were fairly like, I wouldn't say easy for me to teach, but like I had a lot of experience in, right? So no problem. So 3 courses for Tea Leaf Academy. In our mind, this is asynchronous, so it could take as much time as you want, but no assessments. But in our mind, we were thinking 1 month, 1 month, 2 months. So first course, 1 month, second course, 1 month, third course, 2 months. And they were priced differently, right? So they were like, the first course was like $500 or $400. Second course was like 600, and the third course was like 2,000, something like that. And the whole thing was, like 2,500 if you wanted to buy all 3. Again, people were willing to spend money. That really wasn't a problem. And it, as an education curriculum, you will always have great success stories if you select. And the question for you as a designer of a curriculum is, what do you want that percentage to be? Obviously, if it's closer to 10% success, that's probably not good by any measure. When it gets confusing is when it gets to 50%, 60%, 70%. Is that still okay for you, right? As a curriculum designer, at some point, 100% might be too strict. But what percent is okay for you as a curriculum designer? And I think this is a question that all education institutions, not just coding schools and coding boot camps, but all education institutions have to answer for themselves. What is the success percent that you're happy with, that you can execute on, right? Because every education institution will have great testimonials, but is it a result of selection bias? And what is the actual success percent of the students coming into the program? For Tea Leaf Academy, just if I were to ballpark it, I would say it was closer to 50% than 90.
Mhm.
And I think we could have easily just said, yeah, that's just the way it is. That's just the way education is, right? 50% success for some, compared to some education institutions, would be great, right? That's not a big deal. But I think it's one of those things where like we didn't do this to try to start a company to teach people to code. You know, we were still kind of like, okay, we're maybe going to build a product, right? We're software engineers. We're like product builders, right? Not teachers or anything like that. So I was still at the time, even with TDEV Academy, I was thinking, you know, this is good, but you know, we're still gonna maybe build a product later. The problem is, it just, I felt like there was a lot of unfinished business here. I felt like we had something really good, but there was just something off with our hypothesis. And I'll mention sort of that a little bit, in that our 3-course sequence, remember, 1 month, 2 month, then 2 months. So the first course was supposed to be a quarter of the entire sequence, a quarter. So the topic in the first course was basic programming plus basic networking plus basic database. Right, so you laugh now because you know the launch school curriculum now. Okay, so that was the first course. The second course, 1 month, was Introduction to Rails course. Nothing advanced, just Introduction to Rails. The third course, the 2 months course, we had like over 100 hours of videos in that course. TDD everything, integration with Stripe, you know, integration with external APIs. I mean, it was like a full-blown app. Integration with AWS, all this stuff, right? Everything's like TDD. That was what's in the third course. Okay, so if you can finish that, of course you're going to be an amazing, you know, marketable software engineer. Problem is, people will go through this and at the end ask questions like, "What's inheritance?" Right? And we just do a sort of hit your forehead moment, like, "How, you know, we covered that, remember?" Like, yeah, you know, I kind of do, but I kind of don't. Right?
Right.
That just kept happening over and over and over because people would get stuck in a third course, and we would try to help them. And of course, there's a problem when your explanation, they don't understand your explanation. There's a mismatch, right? When your explanation doesn't clarify, it causes more questions. And then you keep doing that. And you're like, man, what, you know, we talked about HTTP back in course 1. It's like, yeah, you know, but I don't remember. So law school today, the entire core curriculum is that first course. Do you see the difference?
Oh,
like, that's what we
wow.
learned. Like, T-Leaf was such a miss, right? In terms of if you care about like people's actually understanding. If you didn't care about that, we could have just, you know, we could have rolled a lot of different ways going forward with TDEV Academy. We could have turned it into one of those like $9 per month subscription services, kept making videos. I felt like there was a lot of different ways of moving forward. But again, the key problem we were trying to solve is, can we make sure people understand? Can we get close to 90%, 100% comprehension at the end? How do we do that? Right? Because of course we can go make money, you know, 1,000 different ways with our courses, or without our courses, just with our experience. You know, we can go get a job. But I think what was interesting was just a problem, the education problem. And to me, it was a puzzle. It was a puzzle that I wanted to solve. And so we had to add assessments, right? That was, and again, for us, that was one of those, like, you know, like, teachers know about assessments and tests for a long time. And, you know, and if you do it a certain way, and if you explain to people why you need it, it can be good, right? So, so we added assessments, and also we realized, watching people go through our TDEV Academy courses, it's just all about fundamentals. There was nothing in our third course, our, you know, $2,000 course, that was really that complex, frankly. The confusion was all around the fundamentals. it was the key to everything and all the confusion. Like APIs are not that hard, integrating with external APIs is not that hard. TDD is not that hard, but it's hard if you don't know any of the fundamentals. Right. And so that was the main problem that we saw. So we just decided, like, we need to just make sure to drill on fundamentals and assess, because people are bad at self-assessment, even though we're not afraid of people like lying, but it's more like, in the T-Leaf courses, we would check in on people and say, how'd you like the first course? Like, oh, I liked it a lot. It was great. I learned a lot. I didn't know about all this. And it's like, okay, great. That seemed like, stuff. And then later on, didn't get in there, right?
Yes.
So you need it later. So that's how we came to Launch School, and that's why we rebranded too, because it was just a completely different thing from T-Leaf. We didn't want people to conflate the two. And so in the end of 2015, so again, at that point, it was 3 years of, I think we realized the problem a year and a half into T-Leaf Academy, because it takes it's a 4-month course, so it takes some time for people to finish it, and then we see results. And so a year and a half, we started to recognize the problem, and then we started to work on Launch School. It took like a year for us to build it. So that's why, the whole duration is 3 years. It's not just like, oh, we recognize the problem, we changed it, right? It was just a lot of work. And then we launched Launch School at end of 2015, beginning of 2016. And it's what you see today. And we've been tweaking it a lot, the curriculum, but the overall sort of pedagogy, overall thesis of Launch School is consistent. And I think it's been right, in that we now have capstone grads and core grads who have been working for years and years, and we get feedback, right? So it's been rewarding to sort of see that entire journey, knowing how hard it was. And frankly, part of the reason it was hard is because we didn't have like education background, for good or bad, and just again trying to figure out sort of from first principles, quote unquote, and from sort of a software engineering mindset of tackling the processes and the system, and coming up with what we have today.
That's amazing. So from T-Leaf, you kind of figured out that mastery fundamentals and first principles is the way to go, is the way to teach it. And was that because of those people taking the test and not really knowing what was going on, or were you like researching other schools and boot camps and seeing what they were doing and just realizing like
nobody was doing this? Yeah, no, we didn't look at anything else. We had a lot of students. Like I said, we never had the problem of like, where are students or anything like that. And I think part of it is, we were fortunate to sort of start when we started, when we were among the first wave of coding boot camps, right? Coding boot camps came about around 2012, 2011, 2012. And we were in that burst. We just didn't take VC funding, and we didn't, grow as rapidly because, again, we didn't feel like we figured out the problem. Like why, money, people were paying us money, so we didn't really have that problem. VC funding is great if you want to step on the gas pedal. You want to step on the gas pedal when you have a good direction to go. We never felt that. We never felt that we had a good direction to go. Like I said, I was happy with the results that we got from T-Leaf Academy. Even today, I get emails from people, T-Leaf grads, that are like, hey, thanks so much. And a lot of our T-Leaf grads now are like managers. And so I know a handful at least that are hiring our capstone grads now.
That's amazing. So there are success stories.
Great, right? So there's a lot of success out of T-Leaf Academy. There was a lot of success out of those T-Leaf courses. I just wasn't happy with the hit percentage, right? So in my mind, it's not just about, it's about trying to reach for the ceiling, because when you design education curriculum, I feel like you're always being pulled in two different directions. One is, can you reach for a ceiling? Can you reach for the maximum result? Or do you want to serve more people? Like, these are not two things you can do at the same time. Right? So that's the hard part. The hard part isn't if you just do one or the other. if you say, I just want maximum potential, easy, select aggressively. If you say, I want a curriculum that is more catered towards everybody, easy as well, because you don't have to worry about reaching for maximum potential, right? It's more serving everybody. How do you do both? That's not easy. That's not easy. So I want to do that, right? I wanted to do both. Otherwise, there's no point in creating yet another like elite education institution that just selects, right? I feel like that's not really interesting. Like I said, I think this is the privilege of being an experienced software engineer, right? You're just like, you can manufacture money with a job anytime you want. So that, making money was important because we want to stay alive, but it wasn't like the thing.
It wasn't the thing.
Yeah. So and also, how do you design a curriculum that minimizes harm? Because in education, I think it's so easy to attract people and then highlight the success, but then the people that couldn't derive any value out of the education experience wasted money, wasted opportunity cost. So how do you minimize that? How do you minimize the opportunity cost and the actual cost, right? To that experience if you don't have a good one. So this is why we don't do annual plans, right? So we have this system where I think all these things taken into consideration, we want to try to reach for one's potential and try to push to maximum result, but also be fairly egalitarian, open, but also minimize harm to people. Because in education, what I've noticed is there's a lot of vulnerable people that, especially career transitioners, right, that want to go into software, and it's very, very easy to convince them to pay you money. Like, that's not hard. It's like a great place for scam artists, because there's just so many people that don't know, and they substitute money for a path forward, right? So, and I wanted to try to like minimize that. So for us, we're like, hey, come check us out. You don't like us, you can leave anytime. And if you first have to go through like a prep course, right, which is a lot, and then you pay $199 a month. Hey, it didn't work out. You lost $200 in a month, right? And so that's why we're designed the way we are, based on all that experience and all those ideas. How do we like fit all these ideas together?
And that's what attracted me to law school, because I'm one of those people you're talking about. I was a career transitioner from architecture. I had no idea about this field. I knew nobody, and I felt kind of vulnerable because I didn't know where to start. I didn't know what to do, and I wasn't really financially okay at the time. But I still spent money on all these books that I tried reading, didn't work out. Tried free code camp, tried a whole bunch of other courses too that I paid for. None of them ended up working. And then I ended up finding launch school by accident. And that was one of those things that really attracted me, was the fact that I could try the prep course, see if I liked it. And at any time during the core, I could just stop. And it seemed less risky to me. Sure, it's $199 a month, but I was paying over $5,000 a semester for 2 45-minute classes at my university. So I was like, $200 versus a few $1,000s, not that bad. So I think
it allows you to dip your toes into the water, and it allows you to try it. And I make no claims that launch schools for everybody, because that's impossible. I mean, everyone's so different. Everyone has different goals. Everyone has, and so and I don't know if launch schools for you, but there's a very, very low risk, low cost way of figuring it out. And I will say that you should try launch school first, because every other education institution does it the opposite. There's a high fee, and no matter what happens at the end, you pay that fee. And so why do that first, right? There's a lot of risk there. There's also, I think pricing also influences like how we behave. Like, we don't really do phone calls. I used to do phone calls with students when we first started, more from like a learning perspective. But right now we don't do phone calls. right? And part of the reason is because it costs $199 to start. we're you know, you take a phone call, we're not going to be able to make any money at all. We're losing money, right? And so that doesn't incentivize a marketing oriented approach for good or for bad, right? And just because, you know, a conversion from sort of, you know, marketing speak, a conversion for us is $200. Like, that's not a high enough number for us to go and like put out the red carpet.
Right.
If it's $10,000, we're on you like bees to honey, right? I have my marketing team and sales team go and convert you, because every conversion is $10,000. So this is why, you know, it's not yeah, partly it's because I personally am not a marketer. I don't like marketing, but I'm not averse to it, but it's you know, the world runs on marketing, frankly. So but the pricing point also like incentivizes me to behave a certain way that's congruent with sort of my values, right? So all of that sort of fits together to kind of, you know, you get what you see today at Launch School.
3 courses, $2,000.
You mean T-League?
Yeah. Wow. And
yeah,
so
it was good. It was a really good thing. I mean, the subsequent 2 courses are in the archives right now for Launch School, so you can still see them. They're super outdated at this point, but they're still very, very good. Like, to this day, I don't see courses like that.
Really?
It just has to be refreshed. Yeah, it's really good. Like, we deconstruct everything, you know, as we do for Launch School, for sure. Or we deconstruct even more. But those courses, you know, because most courses and books are just like build this and copy and paste, you know.
Yeah.
Even in the Tea Leaf courses, we're trying to ask you to deconstruct. But yeah.
Awesome. I was just, on a side note, I was just looking at those courses today, just to see what was there. One of my questions was, why did you start with Ruby? And I was like, let me see if I can figure this out for myself. So I went to those archives one, and a lot of it was Rails and prototyping and stuff. I thought, oh, well, maybe at the time Ruby was more of a popular language, and most people learn or want to learn Ruby, I guess, to learn Rails to build web apps. So that was probably maybe an easy choice at the time to make.
Yeah, sure. We can talk about that for sure. That's definitely a part of it, in that, like, there was a rise of coding boot camps. They all use Ruby, and a lot of them still do. And that was exactly why Rails was. So there's some like historical coincidence here, right? In that Rails came about, was launched in, I want to say like 2006, around 2006, Rails. And I was in there in the very beginning around 2006, because at that time I was an enterprise Java developer. And I was just very bogged down by sort of the enterprise coding world. Didn't enjoy it. Things have changed now. Don't send me hate mail. All these Java developers are always emailing me. I used to, you know, I was a Java developer for a very long time. And when Rails came out, it coincided with the rise of startups.
Okay.
So the rise of startups was, you know, there was a .com bust, 2002-ish, right? 2001, 2002-ish. There was a .com bust, that first wave, and then by mid 2000s, the activity came back up again. Money started going back into it again. 2006, 2007 really things started to take off in the startup world. And so a lot of money kind of got into it again. And they were funding companies with like 100 grand, right? They were starting companies with 100 grand. Now, Java is one of those things where you need like really expensive tooling. Or historically, right? There's open source alternatives, but a lot of the really good Java tooling it costs money. So these startups just wanted like, and also enterprise Java is slow, right? It's a lot of boilerplate code. Like my project plan for our enterprise projects were like the first 2 weeks were just set up and configure. 2 weeks. And so here's this Danish guy coming out with a video, like a 5-minute video that builds a blog in 5 minutes, right? You're like, whoa, you can build a blog in 5 minutes? I can like download struts in 5 minutes, maybe. Struts is a Java framework, right? Java web development framework. And so it was just one of those things where there was one meme at the time, I believe it was on Twitter. Yeah, Twitter started like 2007-ish, right? 2006-ish, or 2005, maybe Twitter did. There was one meme on Twitter where they were like, okay, to learn Rails, you need 2 books, one on Ruby, one on Rails. It was like 2 O'Reilly books, or yeah, 2 books. And then to learn Java, there was a stack of like 10 books, right? And so it's like, what, as a developer, what do you want to learn, and what stack do you want to use? So Rails caught a lot of enterprise developers. Enterprise Java, enterprise.NET. A lot of enterprise developers were just sick of enterprise development, and they caught that. And then on the other side, it caught a lot of PHP developers who needed structure, right? But at that time, again, PHP developers don't email me. But at that time, PHP developers had a reputation for, like Spring SQL and their view templates, and all the apps had all these like SQL injection problems, no discipline. Right? Like Java, enterprise Java, too much discipline, like bureaucracy. PHP, no discipline. So Rails struck like a really nice middle band and attracted folks from both sides.
Wow.
And so it became the stack of choice for a lot of startups at that time that were getting a lot of money, and there was a lot of shortage of Rails developers. So I was an engineering manager in San Francisco at the time, running a development team, trying to hire people, Ruby, Rails, JavaScript, very similar to today, actually, databases. Throwing money at people just like 2 years out of school and getting rejected, just throwing money at them. So there was a dearth of good Rails developers, and Rails was just catching that sort of startup momentum, catching the money train, right, at that time. And the coding boot camps really stepped in there to react to that. And, we were in that same bucket there at the time. So some historical information for everybody. It's fun times when I think about it.
Yeah, that was one of those questions I always wondered about, because I was not at all in the software. I didn't even have a phone until I was 18. Like, I just was not a part of that world. So I had no idea what was going on at that time. So it's really interesting to hear about Ruby and Rails being so popular. And I guess that's why you chose Ruby as the one and only track to start Launch School with.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it was either going to be Java, Ruby. At the time, JavaScript, it was still rising, and there was just too many things in flux in the JavaScript world. Like at the time, there was like Ember, Angular, React. It was 3 choices in terms of frameworks. Today, just React, right? Right now, 2022. We'll see what the future holds. But at the time, there was 3 frameworks that all could potentially be, the dominant framework. And the language itself was also under a lot of flux. So we never considered JavaScript for that reason. Certainly Python was in there. And we also had some crazy ideas like C or something. But I mean, look, there's a reason why all the coding bootcamps at that time started with Ruby. There was just a need. Like I said, when people are throwing money at you, you're like, okay, this is a direction, there's something here. Whether or not you take that money is up to you and overpromise, right? But it's like, there's a demand here for this thing, right? So that's why we went down, and we were, already pretty experienced Ruby developers at that time. So that was like into 2012, yeah. Like I already had like 5 years experience at that time in Ruby, so.
Are there any future plans to adding other tracks? So the Launch School curriculum, as it stands now, it started with Ruby. It has adapted to have a JavaScript track, so you could choose either or. Do you see any changes in the future that might prompt you to add another course to Launch School? Or track,
maybe.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not like huge on another track yet. What I like is introducing languages that expose people to new mental models.
Mhm.
So for example, in Capstone, we added Golang. So we asked people to learn Golang, and we do all the algorithms and data structure stuff in Golang. And
Okay.
we are thinking about expanding that more in the future to, maybe even build some projects in Golang. We'll see, right? And that's because whether you did the Ruby track or just the JavaScript track, the Ruby plus JavaScript track or the JavaScript track, Golang gives you exposure to sort of new ways of thinking,
Hmm.
right? So like another one is maybe TypeScript that we want to add. And also the reason is because we're seeing it on job interviews, right? We're seeing
Right.
a lot of Golang. A lot of our graduates go off and work in Golang jobs.
Oh,
They see a
interesting.
lot of TypeScript, right? So these are things that expose you to new ideas, and that's which is good, and also it's good for the job market. I think for a certain type of employer, there's certain types of like I need Python experience, for example. That's fine. Our grads can't apply for that, but a lot of our Capstone grads actually end up in Python jobs
Oh,
because
interesting.
if you know Ruby well, they're pretty confident that you can pick up Python, right? So that's why I don't know if we need like a Python track just to hit maybe the companies that are demanding Python experience,
Hmm.
but usually those types of companies aren't paying in the range that our Capstone grads are targeting, right?
Hmm.
So I've talked about this topic a ton of times, but I'll just touch on it for 1 second here since we're talking about it, is that there's skill and there's knowledge. Based on my observation, the higher the paying the job, the more they want skill. You need knowledge to bootstrap your skills development, but it's not about knowledge bits, right? Some of the lower paying jobs actually demand a lot of knowledge. This is the contradiction of what I'm trying to get into software, right? It's like, what do I have to know to get a job that pays this much?
Hmm.
Right? Some of the lower paying jobs actually demand a lot of knowledge. So anyway, so for some of these jobs that we're trying to drive to actually don't demand Python knowledge, for example,
Okay.
even though they're the Python stack.
Hmm.
But you have to be fast learning, right? So,
Right.
so for me, I want to expose people to different mental models. Again,
Hmm.
something like Golang, TypeScript, yeah, like things like that.
That makes
C,
sense.
we did a C seminar. I think you participated, right?
Yes, I did
Yeah,
C and I did Python. And
yeah, you just
that
see in
makes
Python.
sense.
Great, because it
Yeah.
exposes you to just like different ideas. Even if you don't master, it's like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
learners.
And I was surprised at how confident I was walking into the seminar after doing Ruby and a bit of JavaScript, thinking this isn't that bad. I mean, maybe
Yeah,
before I was doing launch school, I probably would have been a little more lost, but I was reading from a book, not trying to master anything, but I was surprised at how fast I could pick everything up.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And so
Hmm.
because you have those strong like mental models,
Hmm.
and that's what I want people to have in launch school is, yeah, you got to master language, but after that, more about mental models. So
Hmm.
so
And that
that's what I'm
transfers.
thinking about next, in terms of like curriculum.
Hmm.
There's always a temptation to add another language track. I just feel like the ROI on that for us is not super high.
Hmm.
But it's never say never, I guess, because the curriculum is always a reaction. I just wrote this in Slack just right now, but like when we first did launch school, it was based on my experience. I mean, it was based on what I saw with TDF Academy and all that, but it was still based on my experience. And like I said, it was the first course of TDF Academy blown up to the core curriculum, right? And
Wow.
that's
It's a lot.
pretty crazy, right?
Yes.
So in other words, the core curriculum was jammed into one course.
I could not imagine that.
Yeah, that's impossible. That's an impossible expectation for people to remember it all, right? And master it all, and then move on to the next course. And that's why we, are focusing on beefing up the current two language tracks we have,
Mhm.
exposing people to more mental models, and not so much like another language track necessarily. But it's a
That
reaction
makes
to the
sense.
market. It's a reaction to what our capstone grads are seeing.
Mhm.
So I wrote that in Slack, right? Like everything we do is now based on that. It used to be based on like my take.
Right.
my experience.
Hmm.
But when we first started, but now more and more it's shifting away from like my personal preference and more towards what the market is demanding of our capstone
Right.
grads,
Hmm.
right? So we're going to react to that.
And that makes sense. You want to push people out into the world when they start working with the skills that they're going to need when, they're in the interview and they're being asked questions. You don't want them to show up and think, I don't know that. I never learned that. And it's like,
Yeah, it's a
oh,
goal-driven curriculum. I mean, we have a purpose, we have a goal. The requirements that we get, like you think about any course or any book that you buy, where does the author get their requirements to cover this topic with this
right.
much emphasis or with just barely a little bit of awareness?
Hmm.
Where,
And
where,
that,
do, where do those requirements come from?
yeah. And that was my next question was, how do you keep the curriculum updated? Even just this past week, you added an assessment and you took one away. And
Yeah.
being in this industry, everything is changing so fast and evolving so fast. It seems like over the course of just months or 1 or 2 years. So how do you keep it updated?
Yeah, it's a live thing for us. All courses, all content that we have, and this is why it's hard, right?
Hmm.
I got an email the other day like, hey, free code camp is free. You charge money. Why do you charge money? I'm like, we have staff and we update everything. And free code camp has a different model. They have a donor model, right? They ask for donations. We don't ask for donations. So it's just a different model, right? But we are constantly working behind the scenes, always
Hmm.
updating. And there's a little feedback widget that's on our website. If you're logged in, you'll see it. It's on the side. If you're on a regular monitor.
Yep.
If you click on it and you write something in there, it opens up an issue for us that's tracked. And we might not send you an email about it, but we work on it. And we have staff working on it. So it's a live document. And so for the assessments that you mentioned that we added and removed, yeah, I actually talked extensively about this on the podcast, season 4, episode 1, that was just fairly recently released. But just to quickly rehash that, it's absolutely due to what our capstone grads are seeing. I mean, that's a really good example of that, right? We added a lot more content in the JS 239 part. And then we also added 189 assessment, right? For the, I guess we didn't take any assessments away. I think we just added. But yeah, it's absolutely based on what we see. There was a discussion today in Slack about our HTML, CSS stuff, right? It's the same thing. It's based on, again, not my personal preference. It's not a reflection of like my values about a piece of technology. It's just what employers are currently asking for. And if that changes, we'll change.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I saw that HTML, CSS, and I'm kind of concurrently going through that course and 230. I tend to forget things if I don't use it, so I kind of go through things as I need it in this course. And I noticed that too, and I noticed even in the spot, there's no even like study groups for 202. And I struggled really hard on the box model and stuff, and I thought, that's strange that we're not, I know it's not being asked in interviews, but we're not being tested on it. So how do I know that I really know this? So like, I'm so used to our model of testing that without a test, I'm like, do I even really know this? I don't like tests, but at the same time, I really need them for myself. And even with the JS 239 interview, I haven't had that experience of working on a project and talking about it. And I thought, I made a project some year ago, 2 years ago. It's been such a long time. Do I remember how to do it? Am I gonna have a hard time in capstone because there's some skill that I haven't practiced yet? So that's kind of actually what I was thinking about today. I was talking to people in my group about it. They're like, "Oh, you'll be fine. You'll pick it up." But I'm still, kind of curious.
I think you'll be fine. I mean, I think it's also a bias in that like the vast majority of our grads are not getting front-end roles. They're not targeting front-end roles. So that has that tint to it. Again, if that changes, then I'm sure they're going to get all these questions on HTML, CSS, and then we'll add the assessment back. We used to have a pretty severe HTML, CSS course along with a book on the open bookshelf, along with an assessment. Really hard. People would spend months in that course. right? So, but again, the problem is this, we just weren't seeing it on interviews. And then the feedback, people give us feedback all the time, including after they finish. And so one of the most consistent pieces of feedback we got was, hey, that HTML CSS course that I spent 3 months on was like complete, not useful.
Oh man.
Right.
Okay.
And so we revamped that course. That used to be called 201. Now it's called 202. That's why that course is 202, right? You're like, why is that number so weird? Because everything else is like 101, that type of thing. But that's a 202 HTML and CSS course. We removed our book as well. And so, again, that's what we're seeing. And so far, again, based on our capstone feedback, that's not one of the feedback pieces I get in terms of like, we really need to beef that up. Things like, hey, TypeScript, maybe GraphQL, right? Things like that. That's the feedback I get in terms of like, what are some gaps that you have in your first 6 months at work, right? Never HTML CSS. That just doesn't happen. But hey, if people see this video and they do, and they go, hey, that's wrong. In my job that happened. We'll add it back. We'll add the assessment back. Right? Like I said, the curriculum is live. This is not a statement about anything. It's just feedback, right? We get feedback from employers, from interviews, and then we update.
That's awesome.
The launch school curriculum is basically a giant cheat sheet for you, right? You can think about it like that.
Do you find that employers are looking for engineers who have networking experience? And I ask this because before I started course 170, which is a networking course, or 171, can't remember. I guess you guys had updated the course to add more information because you realized that there was a need for it. I guess people were being asked about it. Do you still find that now? Is that more of a thing in the software engineering field to know more about networking?
It doesn't come up directly, like, or at least rarely, I guess. But networking as a general topic is very, very big. So specifics will come up, right? Specific like protocols. Like, this protocol? Have you used that protocol? What we cover, we did update the networking course. It's been a minute. It's been like a year or so. But that's a course where we beefed up. Right. So for the HTML CSS, we toned it down a little bit. For the networking, we beefed it up a little bit. Again, why? Again, based on interviews, based on what we see, and also based on the knowledge that we need you to have when you come into capstone, right? Because we need you to do like just-in-time learning to do capstone. So it's more like it's a building block of these higher level ideas that we need you to have. And on interviews that we talk about here, maybe not directly quizzing you about like, how does a TCP handshake work or something like that, but it's a lot of the conversation like implied, like you should know, like the difference between like TCP and UDP, like just generally speaking, right? And the fact that like, like in capstone projects and in interview conversations, you'll talk about other protocols besides HTTP, right? So it'd be like, here's another protocol that rides on TCP. Right. So like statements like this, is that like blow your mind, or is that like, okay, cool, like I can get that, right? Right. Or if it's, there's like a video we watch in capstone, for example, that talks about how they improve the system. They switched out TCP with UDP. Okay, so like improve. There's some cost. There's like, what's the downside of that, right? So you have to know that like intuitively at a high level. So networking comes up like indirectly like that in conversation, and when you're trying to build, again, strong mental models for various trade-offs and maybe other protocols that you're working with. But yeah, I don't know if it's like grilled specifically. I think it's one of those things in interviews when people talk to you and just like, okay, you don't know that, right? And,
you can't know everything.
And so, yeah, and so for me, it's like I want you to know like these basic things.
At least the basics to get started with, and whatever, you get your job, you'll learn things on the job too.
You'll learn things on the job for sure. And this is another thing that it's a little controversial. So I say, I don't want people to perceive it incorrectly, but it's one of those things where you're allowed room to learn on the job. I talk to employers a lot. They're in a very weird situation, right? They're like, I want to invest in people, of course, of course, you have time to learn, but you got to be at a certain place. You got to be here to learn this much. But if you're way down there, I can't give you a year to learn, right? Like that's too much time. So I need people to be here. And I think there's a lot of people that say, well, there's, junior developers, no one's hiring junior developers. But I think there's a problem with who is defining that, right? So like every company gets to say what kind of input they can take, right? Like even our capstone grads, a lot of them get titles like senior software engineer. Look, they're all junior. They're all junior, quote unquote, right? Title, I mean, it can say whatever, but they're all like kind of new to software. But they're at a place where they can ramp up in a period of like a month, 2 months. They're ready for that, right? And I think that's where people need to get to, right? So I think a lot of education institutions will say, hey, if you just come to our training and after 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, you'll be a junior software engineer and you can go apply for junior jobs. And then when they can't find jobs, they blame companies, but they really should be blaming their school or their boot camp. So I always like the employer's going to say what kind of input they need, right? So there is a little bit of like, yeah, you should try to encourage employers to be more open-minded, to take more risk. I think those are worthwhile things for sure. But the ones I'm talking to, they're already aware and they want to. They just have a really hard time finding qualified people. You've been in launch school for a long time now. Again, imagine you're on the hiring side. You're a hiring manager and somebody went to a 3-month program, and you can just tell they don't really understand some of the fundamentals to the point where you need them to.
Right.
There's nothing you can do.
Right. You don't spend time and money investing in that person, which is fine, but they could spend time on their own in the education phase and learn it themselves. And that's the kind of situation I'm in. I'm near the end of core. I'm in the very last course, and I never know what to say when people ask what I want to do. I don't really know because I don't really know what's out there. But I am confident enough to say that I have the skills to learn whatever I need to learn for the job. I have whatever I've learned through launch school, whether it's Ruby, JavaScript, networking databases. I have the foundations right there. So if my employer needs for me to learn Python, I can go off for a few weeks or months and go learn Python. It's not a big deal, whatever it is.
Not years.
Right. It definitely won't take me years. Like I can learn what I need to learn in a few weeks or months. And it could be anything really. And I couldn't have said that at all whatsoever when I first started this. It really took years for me to build this up. Not just the knowledge and skills, but the confidence to say that. So I really like launch school for that.
Yeah, exactly. And so, our whole thing is just trying to figure out what employers want, making a roadmap to there. That's it.
Awesome.
While minimizing harm,
Yes. And even though I have been here for 3 years, still, it took me 3 years almost to get through law school. It's still shorter than a 4-year degree and much less expensive. I've learned so much in this past 3 years, more than I have, I think, in my entire life of being in school. And I've paid a lot less money for it. And I'm going to have so much more at the end of this, a career. I'm going to be financially stable for once in my life. Like I'm going to have so much more from this short amount of time. Like it doesn't matter that it took me 3 years. It doesn't, because
the longer you want to be in this field, the more this makes sense. And I think that's one of the hard parts about this. And I think in education, again, there's a lot of conflicting forces. There's just a lot of conflicting forces, and you have to balance them again, without doing harm, minimizing harm, right? And what I found is the more you stretch out the time horizon, the more things align. all the conflicts happen in the short run. But when you think about years, decades, you know what to do. You know what the right action is, right? And when we first, again, did TWF Academy and did Launch School, I talked to a lot of my friends in the industry about what we're going to do. The feedback I got was fairly unanimous from them. And they were all kind of like me at the time, 10 plus years of software engineering experience, engineering managers, hiring managers, etc., right? Directors. And they said this, there's like, that's absolutely the best education model, but no one's going to do it. You will find 0 students because that's just too long. If you're going to try to ask people to learn for years, why wouldn't they do a computer science program and get a degree? The whole reason why boot camps work is the short duration. It's actually not like any magical education model. It's just hold your breath for 3 months, because that's how long people can't hold their breath for. Hold your life for 3 months. And then you get this job, right? So our model is like, it could be years, we don't know. And so the feedback we got from people are like, no, that's the right way to learn and teach. And I would love to hire people out of that program, but who in their right mind will spend that long learning? And I think we've proven that wrong over the years, right? It's like we can find great students. And in fact, that itself is a good selection criteria, in that it's not selection based on any socioeconomic markers, but it's selection based on effort and perseverance, which is, guess what, exactly what employers want, hardworking, persistent people. And that's the thing we have. And again, the more you stretch it out, the more things align. And again, this multi-year program, how in the world does that make sense? It makes sense if you are thinking about a multi-decade career.
Right.
Right. If you're not, then yeah, of course it doesn't make sense. If you're checking out programming, of course it doesn't make sense. Right.
That makes sense.
So that's the mental model I've had in terms of operating Launch School, is just thinking more long term. Every time there's a confusing point, think long term, it becomes more clear. So the education puzzle, I think, comes together in the long run. In the short run, there's just so many conflicting factors, opposing attributes that just don't work together. Right. But in the long run, it can work.
And that's funny, because you actually just kind of answered my next question, do you think that it was hard to convince people of this when you figured out that you needed to kind of revamp the curriculum? You knew it was going to take people longer to get through the material, to learn the basics, first principles. So that trade-off of going through it fast and getting a job versus slowing down, spending more time to do it, lowering the cost, that must have been difficult to try to convince people that this was going to work, especially because it was a new thing that you were trying to do. But now, having 5, 6, 7 years of experience now in Launch School, going on for this long, we're starting to see proof that people are being successful, and not just graduating capstone and getting a job. It doesn't just stop there. And I think people forget that. I forget that. It's a long-term investment in our career. So I graduate, I get a job, but I'm going to be doing this for 5, 10, 15 years, and it's just going to compound over that time.
A lot more than that.
A long time. And I think,
are you 50
or 60? I could go a long time. And I think that's why it's important now for people to understand. Now Launch School can show you the numbers. And so this person's graduated Launch School 3-4 years ago, and look where they are now. Now you have the proof, and you can show people that this works.
Exactly. Yeah, we have if our whole program is based on long-term alignment, then show me the long-term proof. And we have that for Launch School. Again, we started at the beginning of 2016. We're 6 years into it. We have people who, well, they're not 6 years because they have to do core and then do capstone and then get a job. So I think we started capstone in 2017. So we had capstone grads hitting the market like in 2017 to 2018. So, but we have
Okay, about
capstone
5
grads now
years.
like 3-4 years in the workforce, and they're killing it. You know, they're doing really, really, really well. So that's the thing. This thing works. I can say that now.
Mm-hmm.
Launch
Now we
School
have
works. Our
proof.
hypothesis was correct
Mhm.
in focusing on fundamentals, and there's a payoff. The slow path, there's a massive, massive payoff. Otherwise, it's not better. Slow by itself is not better, right?
Right.
Slow is only better if there's a better payoff later.
Mhm.
And so we can point to that now,
Mhm.
for sure.
Yep. And that was my next question was, do you think with the way Launch School teaches, again, focus and emphasis on mastery fundamentals, first principles, will hold its relevance even 10 years from now, 15 years from now, knowing the kind of field that software engineering field is, the tech industry, how it changes constantly. We could have languages, tools, technologies that we've never even heard of in just like 5 years. So do you think Launch School as it is will still be relevant even in that time?
Yeah, I mean, there is change at the level that we are operating at, which is the language basics, networking basics, database basics, but it's the change is much faster at the higher levels, the framework levels.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, less than 10 years ago, or maybe even around 5 years ago, there was a question mark of like, what is going to be the dominant front-end framework? Today is React, but if you look at the React ecosystem, there's a lot of just churn and new things coming out all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you have a sort of a new gen coming up, JavaScript frameworks. And so we won't participate in that in core. So core will just be, we have to update the language as it goes, right? We have to update maybe a Postgres version because we use Postgres in our database course, right? We have to do stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's more maintenance. So, you know,
But not anything
like Ruby
drastic.
3 is coming out, so we'll have to update our Ruby curriculum, Ruby 3.
Hmm.
So things like that we'll always do, right? But nothing dramatic for us. And you know, that's just the nature of having a curriculum. You have to constantly update it.
Mm-hmm.
But even if we don't update it, I think the concepts, if you can, you know, do a little mapping from the updated syntax with the concept, I think it'd be great. It'd be fine,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But we're gonna, you know, we're gonna update it too.
That's awesome. I like that sense of stability. It'll always be there. The fundamentals don't really change, even if
They don't really change in such a long
technologies.
time period. But in the next 10 years, do I expect dramatic changes to the fundamental Ruby and JavaScript syntax? You know, probably not. There might be other things that come up, new language features for sure. And we'll update those, right? We'll update that as that comes. But, you know, like fundamental SQL syntax, I don't think that's going to change, right?
Right.
So,
Good to know.
I mean, there's like product specific syntax, right? Like this is my experience. This is, by the way, why Launch School, like we use like open source tools, right? So in college, I took this database course. I liked it a lot. I learned a lot. I didn't know at the time, but it was, well, I knew at the time, but I didn't know how detrimental it was, but it was all Oracle. It was like all Oracle databases. And I became really good at it because I was really into it. And I became really good at Oracle. And then I went to work for IBM. They had their own database. It's called DB2. And so for the most part, yeah, it's all fine, the basics. But there was some special stuff in the Oracle database that DB2 didn't have. And I was like, why did I learn this? Why did I? And I later found out, you know, Oracle made a big donation to my school, and that's why. But but that's why for Launch School, I'm like, I'm not picking any proprietary tools. You know, we're gonna use Postgres. We're not gonna use any Oracle or whatever. So, or, you know, or DB2, right? So for us, the fundamentals even transcend vendors, right? We don't want you to have vendor specific knowledge. We want you to have just open source fundamental knowledge.
That makes sense. Again, the whole emphasis on foundations and basics. As long as you know like how to work around databases, how to get information, that can translate to any language or tool that you're using. Doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, you can always bridge the gap between, like, if you go off and work for Oracle, you know, you have enough database fundamentals to keep learning because
Right.
you'll have to do that, right?
Yeah. Okay. So speaking about the industry and tools, technologies, all the things that's out there, do you see any current trends happening right now in the software engineering field?
Yeah. So one of the bigger trends I've seen is sort of the cloudification of everything. Everything's kind of going cloud. This is a point of emphasis for us in Capstone.
Hmm.
And core is really good, and we're learning how to code in core. But software engineering happens when code meets data.
Hmm.
So in core, we don't talk about data at all, really. In the database, of course, we do a little bit. The real complexity of software engineering and why salaries are so high is when data meets code. What happens? And so it's the idea of you take the same code base and you deploy it, you know, deploy 5 instances of that code base, identical code. And one has 5 users, one has 5,000 users, one has 50,000 users, and one has 50 million users. You fast forward a year, the code bases will all look very different. I shouldn't say the code bases, the infrastructure. The infrastructure, and probably the code base too, but the infrastructure on which this app is deployed is going to be completely different. It's not just going to be Heroku, right? And so like 5 users, it doesn't really matter. There's no software engineering involved. It's just programming. Your coding features, deploy it to wherever you want to deploy it. No big deal. 50 million users. All of a sudden, the data access, the data that hits your code is paramount.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to drive the infrastructure. And so infrastructure is going cloud now because of on-demand provisioning. You know, back in the day, you had to buy hardware. I mean, you needed to get $1 million funding just to buy machines. Forget about software salaries, right? So nowadays, with on-demand provisioning, it's allowed your $1 million to go towards software development ability, and not have to worry about, you know, buying servers, buying hardware. So the cloudification of everything has been a trend for a long time. New CEO of Amazon comes from their AWS. That tells you something, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all of Amazon. You know, Amazon owns like Whole Foods, so they picked their AWS, their cloud person, to now head up all of Amazon, right? And I believe the same was true for Microsoft. I want to say came from the cloud, or maybe I'm misremembering a different company. But the point is that this is one of the, there's lots of trends in software, but this is one of the biggest ones right now, and this is where a lot of need is happening in the software engineering world. This is why salaries are so high. It's not just about coding. So this is what we spend a significant amount of time talking about and covering in Capstone.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, I know. People finish calling, they're like, I'm ready to go. But yeah, we're just getting started.
Yeah, there's so much to learn.
Yeah, and I don't see any coding schools covering this at all, right? It's just like usually they like learn React. They push you to React, and it's like go for it. You know, for us, it's definitely on the software engineering side when data meets code. But that's where all the concerns and problems and software engineering come in, and frankly, why salaries are high, because you're working on a class of problems that is very impactful.
What about like security? I know they talk about security in the networking course. I think it's the last lesson, and you know, you hear on the news, this company had a security leak and all this data was breached and all this information is just out there. How is that ever taught? I don't know. In Capstone, I kind of refrain from asking.
So, you know, for us, like I always say, we cover things based on what we see on interviews, right? We definitely cover, I wouldn't say it's like a point of emphasis for us, but we definitely cover sort of best practices that everyone does. If you remember in our, I believe in course 170 or 175, we taught people how to hash passwords. And to, like, for example, in your database, you don't save, or that can't be 175, 185, I guess, because you need a database.
180.
Must be 185. How to hash passwords. You don't save, plain text passwords as plain text in your database, right? You have to hash it. So we cover sort of best practices like that. We do have capstone projects that cover, various aspects of security. Like we had a secrets manager project. And also as you're building, you're picking up sort of, again, industry best practices. That's security is a cross-cutting concern in every aspect of software development and software engineering, right? So it's hard to cover like that one topic, period. And also security is a dial that you get to pick in your development, and it's not always put at the 100% mark. It's just like building a house. Like if you have a safe in your house, like how secure is your house? It's like, what if somebody throws a rock through the window and climbs through it? Yeah, that's illegal. At some point the legal framework comes into play. Right. But you're not going to be like, I'm going to put iron bars on the window. But what if you have a blowtorch and cut the iron bars? Yeah, they're going to get in. Right.
Oh, I see.
So it's not like it's like secure to the point where it's Fort Knox and nobody can get in, period. That's almost implausible, right? So for security for software systems, it's a very similar thing where we have to employ best practices. We have to put locks on doors, and we have to have knowledge of industry best practices and standards.
Okay, that was interesting. I didn't have a question, but it kind of just prompted me because I'm hearing on the news a lot of all of these data breaches and stuff, and it's like, come on, like really, what's going on? And I'm wondering like what the problem
all of a
is.
sudden there's incentive. If you hack a system now, you can get $600 million instead of a little bit of money. You can get that much. So yeah. Okay,
I'm going to kind of shift a little bit into, I guess, launch school students in general. So my question is, besides obviously learning fundamentals at launch school, what do you think makes a successful student?
I mean, there's a lot, and I think most of it has to do with non-technical ability. It's positivity. That's just number one. Got to be positive. Professionalism, right? So positivity and professionalism. We've been teaching for a long time, and we've had a lot of different students come through. I would say, for me, for launch school now, I'm fairly fanatical about the community in terms of enforcing standards. You can see that sometimes. Maybe it's a little bit too strong-handed sometimes, but there's a reason for that. Because what I've observed is that the default behavior of online communities is like a frat house. And if you don't enforce standards, that's just the natural direction. Somebody will say a joke that is semi-appropriate, and somebody go, oh, that's okay. Like that's an okay thing to do. And then that bar will just get pushed, right? The next joke will push it a little bit further and a little bit further. So I think it's like knowing how to be professional, super important, knowing how to participate in a community like ours, being positive, not being rude, right? That's so hard. And also not being, this is easy to say, it's hard to do, like set aside the ego. like a lot of times, and online is hard, right? Like this is why I like doing these videos, because you see people's faces, you see, like if I say something, you can tell that it's not delivered with any negative intention, right? Hopefully you can tell. Right? And so, but when I write it, you're like, hey, I'm offended by this statement. Right? Like this is like, who are you to tell me this or that? So sometimes that happens, especially we have to we have to be critical in our role. We're not just waiters at a restaurant, kind of always delivering whatever you ask. It's like, hey, this needs improvement, right? We have to say that sometimes. And I would just say, like, in that type of environment, just assume positive intent. And sure, we can do more in terms of like surrounding it with sugar, but we don't do that a lot.
Yeah.
So we need people to assume positive intent, right? I mean, we're not rude, but we're just like, you need to improve line 5. Like,
Yeah.
I'm busy. Sometimes I'm looking at something, I'm like, hey, line 5 needs some improvement, and I'm off. And there's no negative intent, and then boom, it's like, next thing I know, I'm getting curse words in my email. So it's hard. It's hard. And again, just this is why I think I like doing podcasts, doing these videos, just to show that, like, hey, I'm a human being. Usually I don't have any, like, I'm not trying to send a message. There's no like additional baggage with whatever I'm saying. It's just I'm busy. I'm doing a bunch of things, so I write a couple sentences and I'm off.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important in a remote work environment. So, yeah, I would say all those things, like positivity is number one. just be, like I always say, even negative people like to work with positive people.
Yeah.
Right? So just work on that. If that's not my natural demeanor, being super positive. But over the years, I've sort of found a way to derive joy out of work, and that's really helped a lot, instead of work out of like fear, or work out of a place of like obligation because I have to. People always talk about imposter syndrome, and I think it's natural and okay, but I think one of the most devastating side effects of having imposter syndrome is being fearful. I've worked with a lot of different people in my career, and I would say fearful people are the most difficult to work with, because you don't know what they're going to do. They behave weirdly. It's hard to have an objective debate about something, because there's a defense mechanism that kicks in when people are scared. It's like, oh, you're attacking my work. Am I going to get criticized? Am I going to lose my job? Right? It's like all the wheels start turning. You can just tell. And the behavior is just odd. It's odd behavior. So imposter syndrome is natural, but I would just say don't work out of fear, right? Don't work out of that's number one. Work out of positivity if you can.
Yeah, I kind of felt a little bit of fear coming towards the end. Kind of as a side note, knowing, like, people always say, oh, you're so close to the end, you're so close to capstone. And in my head, I'm like freaking out over these tests and assessments, and I see how much work ahead of me. And I think sometimes it gets to me a little bit. I'm trying to learn to get better at that.
Yeah, but you say that, but you're here making videos, you're active in the Slack, but yeah, it's hard. I mean, this is on top of everything else we've already talked about throughout Launch School, which is like persistence, studiousness, those type of things, right? So just in terms of like personal attitude that you can change, I think it's just like, again, try to be positive, try to be enthusiastic, and be professional. I think these are super, super critical to not just do well here at Launch School, but like that's what employers are looking for. And everyone wants remote jobs nowadays. Like, that's even more important.
Yeah.
You don't have the body language to help convey your message. You don't have lunches. You can't take a walk. So it's even more critical to like be open, be positive.
Yeah, and those are things that I've learned too, being in law school for this long. I feel like I was a completely different person from when we first met. I was so shy. I was terrified of having to reach out to people online. I didn't really even know how to act with people online because I've never done an online school before. I was so used to being with people and learning in a classroom with other people. And so there was a lot of mental shifts and habits that I had to change. And it was kind of hard, and growing out of my shell, learning how to talk to people. And those are skills that I didn't think that I would get coming to law school. I just thought, oh, I'm going to go to law school, learn fundamentals. I'll be really I'll learn all these skills and learn all these languages and things like that. But I never thought about the non-technical side, the soft skills that you need. How, and that comes even from the assessments too. Can I talk in front of someone about my code? Can I, can I keep my cool? Can I reach out to people that I don't know, ask them for help, and, offer advice or help of my own? And that just came with the experience of going through this and forcing myself or pushing my boundaries. And I love launch school and the community for that, because it's so welcoming, and it is an environment that you feel safe enough to come out of your shell and do these things that you probably wouldn't otherwise do. Because I came into law school with that. So I came into law school with the preconceptions thinking, people are going to make fun of me and be mean to me because I didn't know anything about this field. And so I naturally came in thinking I was just going to study by myself, stay by myself, not talk to anybody, because that was the kind of person I am. That's how I was comfortable. But I've really
It's the default.
grown.
I mean, I think, look, everyone has all these requirements for their employer. Like, it's like, what kind of job do you want? Oh, it'd be great if it was remote. I can work from anywhere. If I have to do something in the daytime, pick up my kids from daycare in the middle of the day, I could do that without, having to ask anybody, right? As long as I'm not missing meetings. Yeah, sure, of course. All these jobs that our capstone grads are getting, for the most part, are like that. Very, very few employers are like, oh, you have to work these hours or, whatever, right? There's meetings you have to attend. But on the flip side, you have to have accountability. Right. You have to have that professionalism, right? You have to have empathy for your colleagues. You have to be proactive, mm-hmm. right? You have to, there's a lot for you too, right? And by the way, I want to make a ton of money too. I want all that flexibility. I want to work from wherever I want, and I want a ton of money. And mm-hmm. all those things are available to you. But it's going to take more than just memorizing some JavaScript, right? It's going to take more than that. Yeah. That all of that comes from learning how to handle yourself, right? Because some mm-hmm. people can't handle it. It's hard. It's too ambiguous and it's too unstructured. But the best jobs are unstructured. The best jobs lack structure, right? Because if you have structure, all of a sudden you're like, oh man, I'm being told what to do like every hour. That doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
So yeah, it takes all of what you just described.
Mm-hmm.
And again, just making these videos is great. It's absolutely necessary. It's a huge part of community building and building trust. And that's at a certain salary level, trust becomes more important than anything.
Yes.
Especially if like you're gonna pull down their code onto your laptop. Trust is so important, right? So it's absolutely not, again, memorize some syntax and I go work for a job and that's it. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely not that.
Oh yeah. The soft skills and the non-technical part, huge part of launch school. To me, sometimes I think about that even more than the actual technical knowledge that I know. When I think of myself now and think how employers are going to look at me, I think I can talk in front of people now. I can interview. I can do these, I can meet people, things like that. All these other skills that have nothing to do with JavaScript and Ruby. But it's like in addition to those things that I didn't even know that I was going to have. And that's so amazing that an online school like provided that for me when I didn't even have something like that at my university or college in person. So very grateful.
At some point, community and culture of an organization overrides everything else. And for me, the thing that I'm most proud of at Launch School is not that we have written 12 books or that we have, I don't know how many, 20, 30 courses, or that our average salaries are over 120 USD now. These are like side effects. These are all side effects of the salary numbers and all that. Side effects of the culture we have, the community we have. And I think it's every education institution, it's hard to like isolate the teaching effectiveness versus the student, mm-hmm. right? It's hard to say like the teaching effectiveness was 80% of why the student got this result, right? If you pick the best schools in the world, pick MIT. I mean, the inputs are really good. You know, they're taking like the best of the best of the best, and you can say, well, like you can probably pick most good teachers, they probably do fine, right? It's one of those things where, like, you know, an average to good coach can probably coach the best teams, right? Obviously, you have a best coach that's better, but it's hard to like isolate the two things in any education institution, right? So like every education institution holds up like their results. Yeah. But I think the question always is like, was that because of your awesome teaching, or is that because the student was already awesome? or I'm sure there's a combo, but what is that combo, right? Is it like 10% teaching and 90% student awesome, or is it 90% awesome teaching and 10% student? Like what is that? And that's always a question on people's minds. And I feel like the answer to that isn't really try to isolate, because it's impossible. It's impossible to isolate. The question is community. The answer is community and culture. It's a culture of studiousness. It's a community of people willing to give. It's a professional, empathetic community that's willing to help each other, right? But it's a culture of excellence and studiousness. Like that combo is what I'm most proud of. And that combo to me is what allows Launch School to get the results that we get. It's actually not like our assessments. I mean, that's important, but
so much more to that.
There's so much more to it than that. Yeah. So that's the thing that I really look at what we have and I go, you know, this is something special. Right. I think our books and stuff are good too, but
yeah,
this is the unique thing about us, right? The people,
the community, the culture, all of it. I think that's something that almost everyone agrees on. I never found that anywhere else, and I didn't think that coming into the engineering field that this is what it was going to be like.
And it's strong enough now where, like, if we have people who come, like, you have to adjust to our culture, and if you can't, it's okay, right? But if you do, you'll see what type of excellent work you can do, right? Because that's what people care about here.
Right.
But also it's sort of like the empathetic excellence, right? It's not just like excellence in terms of filtering. Like, if you can't reach this, get out. It's not like that. It's we're going to help each other. We're going to build each other up, and we're all going to strive for excellence. And I think that's just been amazing to watch the community form over the last, many years.
I love that. I remember when I first started the Women Who Code group, it was going, but the spot wasn't even there. It was still, when I started, it probably wasn't even a study dream team. But I remember joining the study dream team before it was a spot and just seeing how it grew into what it is now. I mean, we have our own like GatherTown space and it's huge. Like, I was just, it's amazing. And it just keeps getting better.
GatherTown the other day just to check it out. I was like, what is this? I can't believe Marcos did this. And it's awesome. He did a great job. And he's like showing me. And so I checked it out the other day and Joel was explaining closures to someone one-on-one. And I dropped by and they were both like, hey, what are you doing here, Chris? And I was like, this is like the most astounding thing. Right? This is just like getting just the ad hoc study session that is happening and people care. People want to explain it. And it was just amazing to see. And GatherTown's cool because you can walk around. I've done that before in the past, just randomly, and came across certain study centers. They're all so good. I think came across one from Lena, I think, and I was like, this is like amazing.
Wow. Did you ever think it was going to be like this? Like,
No. I think this is a result of trying to not like overhyping, like not being marketing led. I honestly think the people that find us in the beginning were people who really resonated with the idea of like learning things well. And I did not expect or anticipate it, but they also come with other positive attributes I always say like good jobs are good everything, high pay, lots of vacation, right? If you're like a good mentorship, good growth, right? Because some people are like, I'll get paid less if I get all the good things. I don't care if I don't have to make 120. I'm like, yeah, but that's not a choice you get to make. it's the good jobs have everything's good about it.
That's all of it.
Good people are the same thing. Everything's good about good people. It's like, well, I don't need someone that's like awesome at this. I just need to, they're just good across the board. Professional, kind, empathetic, positive, smart. Actually, I'm going to take that word back because I no longer believe in smartness. Hardworking. Let's put it that way, right?
I like that a lot.
Yeah. Hardworking, diligent, studious, kind, right? And so when we have that, lots of people like that, then you build a critical mass, and that's the start of culture. That's the start of the culture you have. And I think, I read a lot of business books and things like that, watched a lot of talks. They always talk about culture. Always the abstract term to me, and also usually talking about work culture, right? So I'm always thinking about work culture. I'm always thinking about like, okay, make sure like our staff are happy. I have a very staff-centric view of things, right? But the thing that caught me off guard was the culture of our student community, and just seeing that, it's like, wow.
It is, right? Wow. I think about it too. I mean, I'm in it, and it just blows me away every time I see it. And just being a part of this group, this community, has even changed the way I feel about myself because of how these people are, how kind and welcoming. It's made me want to be that way even more. And it's such a giving community. And I feel like that was one of the things that I felt bad about in the beginning when I joined launch school was, I don't know anything in this field. I can't contribute. I can't give anything back. I don't know anything, or I'm not smart enough, things like that, just really negative things. But going through launch school these past few years and growing with this community has really changed how I feel about myself. And you just said it, you said smart, and then you took that back, because as dumb as it is, that was one of those qualities that I didn't think that I had. And I thought that would be the one thing that would not make me hireable or anything like that. Because there's just certain things I struggle on, like the interviews, and I thought, oh, it's just because I'm not as smart as anyone else. And that's what is going to hold me back from being successful. And it's not that at all. And community has helped me a lot to realize that it has nothing to do with prior knowledge or being smart or intelligent. It's just, are you willing to work hard and spend as long as you need to and do whatever you need to learn this? And I learned that firsthand with the last course I did, JS 225. That course really, really challenged me, really tested me, even more so than 109 did. And you remember that. I was a mess. It really tested me.
And did you pass 225?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I feel like after that experience, you hit another hard thing. You're just gonna assume, okay, here's another mountain to climb, but I've climbed some mountains in the past already, so I know I can do this. And this is, again, high-paying jobs. Like you'll work on things you don't know how to do, like all the time. If you are working on things, like, again, here's a question I get, right? I want to make sure that I learn everything I need to know for a programming job. Will your program teach me that? I'm like, no. Absolutely not. Yeah, right? Everything. Because that's not the goal. I mean, in my software engineering career, it's the same thing. Every single like project that we took on was like things that we didn't know, we'd never done before. If you're doing the same things over and over, you're not, that's a low paying job. It's not going to be a high paying job, right? The high paying job are always about building things that you haven't done before, your team hasn't done before. It's exploratory in a lot of ways. And
you grow and change.
Yeah. And so the confidence that you get from your experience in core and in the future Capstone will help with that for sure, right? Will help with that. It's that's all you have to lean on. It's just like, okay, I don't know how to do this, but I figured out a bunch of stuff in the past, and I'm gonna give this a shot and see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I learned that firsthand. Ooh. I remember, yeah, on a side note, talking to you about that. Oh, I had so much anxiety about the test. It still hasn't, it's still there, that part of me of just really wanting to do well and kind of just almost a little fearful. And I just thought, I can't let this get to me. I have to do it no matter how I feel about it. I've trained for so long. I know this, and I just had to take it. And that first written one, I was actually surprised. I don't know if I left feedback, but I don't know if I mentioned it, but I actually liked the test. I had fun taking the test. And I don't know if it's because I worked my butt off to learn those concepts all day, every day, but it actually seemed kind of easy to me. And I don't use that word for like anything.
Yeah, that's great. That's perfect. It's showtime for you, right?
Yeah.
When you have mastery, it becomes showtime as opposed to I gotta pass.
Yeah.
Like, think about the assessments that we have. I gotta pass. What's the point of passing? What is the point of passing? It's the point. The point is actually not the assessment. The point is like these are the things you got to understand. And this is stuff that I wish I had early in my career. I didn't have this. It took me 10 years of bouncing around, and just a lot of pain to figure all this out on my own. And then here is a curriculum wrapped with these exact gotchas, difficult concepts, but because they're tricks and difficult concepts, you got to focus on, right? So we're like focusing on the exact pain that you will encounter later, right? And trying to remove it early.
Oh, I'm so glad I did this. I'm doing this now as opposed to when I'm asking for a lot of money later and I just don't know what I'm doing. But it is like showtime. I mean, I usually kind of walk into assessments thinking, I just have to pass, I just have to pass. But this one, I trained for so long, practiced doing it, I actually got excited. And I was like, you know what? I'm really excited to like show them what I know because I learned a lot.
Exactly. Assessments can be showtime if you it doesn't have to be
attitude.
Fearful.
That was probably the hardest course for me, but looking back, it was probably one of my favorite things to learn because that's probably where I struggled the most. And I think I grew so much in that little bit of time that it ended up becoming like my favorite course, favorite probably experience of it all. So
I mean, you're pretty much on your way now. You're at the point where I feel like you're just you do whatever you want at this point, and you'll be fine.
Thanks.
I hope you do capstone, but you don't have to, right? And a lot of people ask me about, well, is core worth it without capstone? And just like, I mean, it's mastery fundamentals. Like when would that not ever be worth it? So that's people get. I'm going to keep saying this until I'm proven wrong, but I have yet to know anybody who finished core, who graduated core and did not land a job.
So that's like 100%.
After some duration. And I'm putting that at 10 months. But that's just arbitrary. We can say 6 months, but let's say like active job searching, like not, I took a vacation for 3 months or, went to grad school, right? Like that doesn't count, right? If you finish core and you go to grad school, that doesn't count. But if you're actively looking for a job for however many months, we can just decide on a number that seems fair. Right? But I haven't seen that, so
that's
if you know anybody, or if you are in that position, let me know. I want to know, what's going on.
I just saw, can't remember what it was. I think it was LinkedIn. What's his name? Eamon?
Yeah.
He built that app. And it was one of those posts where it's like, congratulate him on his new job. So he has a software engineering job. I thought, oh, that's amazing because he finished core. I don't think he did capstone. So I was thinking, what about like reaching out to him and asking you, how did you do it? What did you do? Because that, I know that's a huge question. I even had that question once, back
You
when
can
I
get a
wasn't
job
sure
right
about
now.
capstone.
I guarantee you can get a job right now. The thing with all those, so you see on Medium and YouTube, it's like, this is how I broke into tech and this is what I got. I almost wish like people would say like what their salary and role was, right? So salary and role, those are two important things. Like if
Yep.
you are, and for us, we're like so biased towards like core engineering, but there's so many other tech jobs.
Yep.
Launch school just doesn't target them. They're not, you can work for them and they get paid a lot. Like sometimes like there's a role called like solutions architect, right? That's usually not a core engineering role. Maybe a little bit more customer facing, but technical.
Mm-hmm.
They pay really well. I mean, 6 figures. And you got good communication ability. You can totally get one of those jobs. It's just capstone's overkill for that, right? Like you can do core and get one of those jobs, no problem, right? And so when people share their experiences, I like they need to say that, right? Those two things, right? Because otherwise it's like, I don't know. It's like, cool, I'm glad you broke into tech, happy for you. But people need to, there's so many different destinations. It's like a train ride with like 50 different stops. And you're like, this is how I got on my train. This is how I got to my stop. It's like, okay, what is your stop?
Yeah.
Like these are the steps I did. It's like, okay, before we talk about the steps that you took and the resources that you used and the books that you read, talk about your stop.
Yeah.
And then I'll decide if I want to go to that stop.
Right, because it could be anything that you do.
Right. So I think that's my biggest complaint with like all these articles and YouTube things. It's just like how I broke into tech. Okay, but like exactly what, right? And so like we do that for Capstone, for example, right? We have a lot of interviews at Capstone, say, hey, this is what people are working on. This is the job they got. This is the salary they got. And all our Capstone grads are like super transparent about it. Well, not all, but like a lot of them are, right? So everyone's different, but a lot of people are like willing to talk about it. And I think that part that's interesting. The only problem with core is when you finish core, like you can do whatever, and we don't have a pricing structure that allows our staff to help, so,
right.
But for Capstone, we do, right?
And that can be kind of scary if you, after being, having a structured curriculum of this is what you're going to study and you're going to have tests and then you can go on it. And then afterwards you're like, well, okay, now what? What do I do now? How do I go get this job? And you have to kind of figure out the things, tools, languages that you need to learn for this job.
Yeah, and it depends on what. So like, again, you can learn React after core if you want. It's like, but then should you? Like, do you want to do React? Like, if you want to do front end work and you want to work on React, yes, that's the path, right? And I think this is one of those like walking down a cereal aisle. A lot of options, but there's a different action for every option, right? And like Capstone is super biased, super biased. Capstone is like pretty targeted. It doesn't like, you don't get like data science jobs out of Capstone,
right?
At least not immediately. Right, you don't get blockchain jobs out of Capstone. We've had several Capstone people eventually get into blockchain Web3 companies. A handful, usually the second job, right? But the first one, Capstone is very biased. We know exactly where. This is why we can craft a curriculum. We know exactly where we're going, right? Exactly. And I think that's the hard part of core. Is like, okay, now you can do whatever you want. Now you gotta like have a path.
Yeah, I kind of gotten used to this, that if I were just kind of left like, okay, what do I learn? And should I learn it? I don't really know, type thing. So I think that'd be interesting to maybe hear from someone who's found a job after core. I think that's something that people would like to know because Capstone obviously isn't possible for everybody.
We have a lot of those. Yeah, we have a lot. Yeah.
That's good to hear.
It's like I said, if somebody finished core did not get a job, I want to know.
Yeah,
I've not heard of that.
Well, that's good to know. I never really think about core like that, and I mean, I would love to do Capstone, so it kind of isn't the same path for me, but that's good that they found jobs. At least if it's not immediately after some time?
There's no standard, right? I mean, there's a lot of people that get jobs in the middle of core, a lot.
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, right. That like when people cancel, they leave a little note, and a lot of them are like, "Hey, I got a job. Thanks so much. I'm done," and they're in like 225, right?
Wow, that's
Or
amazing.
even earlier. Yeah,
Hmm.
very very common.
Hmm.
So that's okay. That's totally fine with me. I think that's a success for us. We just don't track it officially, but that's a good success for us.
I think so. Who's this program not good for? That's
I
a good
think
one.
one of the great things about having a good culture is we can just point to that. It's like you got to fit our culture,
Hmm.
and I think that's one of the things I can say now, whereas earlier I couldn't. Right? You got to fit with what we have already going. And then all the other stuff I talked about, being studious, figuring out how you learn. I think that's the number one thing. I think it's
Yes.
for people who are naturally good students. Um, Obviously, we don't need to talk too much about them, right? Just take the course. But I think the real value of mastery-based learning is it allows people who haven't figured out their study workflow, or it's been a while since, and that's true for a lot of career transitions, been out of school for a little bit, to figure out their study workflow, right? Again, or for the first time. And that is the key.
Yeah.
It's not Ruby or JavaScript. It's really how to study, and also with everyone's personal life situation, right?
Yeah.
You
Hmm.
got a full-time job, you got a family, you got kids, you got all this stuff. Yeah, how? And I don't have answers, but I can show you patterns from previous students. But for you specifically, you got to figure that out,
Yes.
right?
And that's very true. Because, I mean, when I first walked in, I didn't know, again, I didn't really know anything about anything and not even knowing how to study. I remember first starting Ruby 101 having like spiral notebooks, word for word, copied notes, because somehow that's just what I used to do in college. It worked back then. Um, and I filled up all these books and I never read them again.
Mm.
And I spent a lot of time in Ruby 101 figuring out how to study, which is not something I ever thought that I didn't know. I mean, it's not, people don't think about it. Like, of course I know how to study. Maybe not really.
Right.
This is very different.
Very
And I
different.
struggled a lot
Remember, we're
trying
going to go
different
ask for
things.
$120,000 per year.
Yes.
We're going to study enough for that request,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, that's one of the
Like
big
winning the
things.
lottery every year.
Yes.
And by the way,
Yeah.
I want 5 weeks of vacation. I mean, people have all these demands. I don't work from home, you know, and all these demands can be fulfilled.
Yeah.
You got to study a little bit.
Yeah. You have to. There is work, a lot of work on your part. Nothing's just given to you. And so learning how to learn is one of those big things. It comes with time. My system is grabbed from a whole bunch of other people's experiences that I've just formed as my own. And I made that video about how I study
That's
because
such a good video. We need to point to it.
thank you.
We
Thank
added it
you.
to the study guide, by the way.
Thank you.
Yes,
That's so cool.
it is a good video. The how
Thank you.
to study on assessments video.
Thanks. I wasn't even really planning to make that. I just thought maybe someone would like to know, or maybe have some pointers,
Yeah.
because I didn't know what I was doing. And I would always ask for advice on how to do things. And I came up with my own system. That video I did with Karis about kind of passing through the curriculum, getting the study guide, and then going back. That is how I found for me to be more efficient and just to be better. And I thought, well, if other people are doing this, and when I was doing it, I thought, is this the right way to do it? Am I doing it wrong? There really is no wrong way. You've just figure it out, whatever works for you, as long as you do well, you master material, pass the test. That's what matters. Just figure out your own system, and it's okay to change things up if it's not working for you. There is no right or wrong here. So
Yeah, you'll definitely have to point people to that video. Drop a link.
thank you. I'll add the link. Okay, so I'm gonna shift a little bit into I guess more like personal questions about you and how you feel. So first one is, how do you feel when you see students complete core or complete capstone, they become successful at what they do, knowing this is where they started, here is where they are now. How does that make you feel when you see that?
I mean, that's all there is to this, you know, like to me, that's everything. So it's there's so much gratitude in our graduates, you know, and I'm like, hey, you paid us money, you know, or you're paying us money, like, but nonetheless, they're still, they all express a lot of gratitude and they want to give back, right? And I always say, look, your success is how you give back, because I'm going to point to you, right? I'm going to point to you if whenever people ask, is this worth it? Is this going to work? And we have such a wide variety of backgrounds in our, you know, graduate and our alumni network. We have people who never went to college. We have people who went to, you know, went all the way through the end with terminal degrees. And so it, you know, different ages, everything, right? Like, and so I can point to almost like any obstacle that you think you have, I can point to somebody and say, look at how successful they were, right? And they sort of match your profile. But yeah, student success is why we're here. And also I kind of want to keep harping on this, which is student success while minimizing harm. It's very easy to have this training program and hype it up with marketing and attract a lot of people, and then leave X% in the dust. Leave X% with incredible negative outcomes, whether through paying a high fee or whether through opportunity cost, or whether through just misleading them, and then still holding up the Y% that succeeded, right? So it's not only about looking at the success, of which we have a lot, but it's also looking at designing an education process where we're also minimizing harm. To me, that's super, super, super important in how I think about this. This is why for capstone, I'm aiming for 100% success rate out of capstone. It's not okay to have a 90% success rate out of capstone, because capstone is kind of like the traditional education models where we charge a lot of money.
Yep.
Right? And because we have to pay staff and we're giving a lot of time, so we have to charge a lot of money.
Yep.
And I want to aim for 100% there, right? But how do we do that? Well, we have to enforce a super long entry process, which is core, right? Mm-hmm. And then we have a much better handle. And so that to me is super important. But yeah, the people getting, I'm equally happy for core success stories, you know, and I want to see that. It's not that in my mind, I know what the value of capstone is. I know, you know, I see our results, and I think there's even more and more value. We're frankly underselling capstone. We're at the point where employers are contacting me wanting to hire capstone grads. So it's become one of these things where, like, you know, people are looking for capstone grads. And so, you know, I'm not like, if somebody got a job after core, I'm not like, oh man, you should have done capstone, right? I'm like, great, that proves the value of core.
Yeah.
And again, minimizing harm, right? Mm-hmm. Core is awesome without capstone. Capstone is even more awesome. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm going for. It's not core is trash and capstone is where it's all at.
Because without the core, you can't really have a capstone experience. Like, you need core.
Exactly. Core is awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Right? Capstone is just add more awesome to it. So that's, you know, that's the whole thesis of like minimizing harm, aiming for excellence, having a culture, all of that. So student success is everything. And even, I would even say this, even when people check us out and they leave quickly, that to me, it's a success. Students leaving is a success, because thanks for checking us out. I'm so glad that we have this way for you to check us out without having to spend 10 grand. Right? So the worst scenario that I want to avoid at all costs, that people here for a long time and not learning. If you're in 101 for 10 months, that's bad. That's bad on all accounts. I don't want that. Right? If you're here for 1 or 2 months in 101 and you didn't work and you left, great. Good outcome. You know, if you finish core, got a job, great. If you halfway through core, you got a job, great. If you did capstone, you get a job, great. Right? All those things
It's all
are good.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, there's literally one worst case scenario, which is you're in core for a long time and you're just not doing anything, you're not getting anything out of it. That's the one scenario I just want to avoid at all costs.
Mm-hmm. That's time and money and energy spent.
Yeah, exactly. I want to make sure that everyone here is either moving forward or leaving. You know, the way I think about Launch School is just not a typical SaaS business because we're dealing with such a vulnerable population. That's another thing I learned doing sort of like education training is that there are so many people that want to pay money to solve their problems. And it's so easy to get people to pay money. You can just say something, but in the long run, you're going to get found out. You know, in the long run, you're going to hurt people.
Yeah.
Like there was a boot camp. This is maybe, I forget, like 2017, 2018, there was a boot camp that literally just went away. Like it was a kind of a rug pull kind of thing. And it was in business for several years and it got really good reviews.
Was it the Lambda school? Or is that...
No, it was called like Dev something. It was, I don't want to say the wrong name because it, you know, but it was a school that, it was a boot camp that was synchronous, 3 months, that type of thing, good reviews. And actually there, we had a core student leave us to attend that. And it's such bad timing. Right when he went, that happened. Like there was one guy teaching and he just like ran away. He asked for like deposits and then he just disappeared. And it got good reviews. That boot camp got good reviews. And then that guy came back and he was like, well, guess I shouldn't have left. I was like, it was just bad timing. I mean, I don't know, right? Like it's hard to say what could have happened, but you know, like getting people to pay for education materials, not that hard. Getting results is hard. You know, getting people to read that book is hard. Getting people to buy the book is not.
Yeah.
Right?
It's
and we're about reading the book. We're not about buying the book.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm like, if you're here and you're not reading the book, leave. Right? If you're here and you're not doing anything, you shouldn't pay.
Yeah.
And if you're here, I want to try to figure out how to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Let's work on that. Right? Mm-hmm. Because after you finish this, I know good things are there for you.
Yep.
Right. So that's how I think about all of this. And that's why I think it's just different, right? I think from a business perspective, it might be easier to just create some courses and books and sell them, frankly, and not have to worry about results, right? Mm-hmm. But and you know, most authors, I should say, not every, but most authors measure their own success based on how many books they sold, how many courses they sold, not based on how many people read them,
right?
Or how many people finished a course, right? It's almost a joke, like, you know, do your Udemy courses, read your books, right? So
yeah, I'm kind of guilty of that a little bit.
Yeah, everyone is. I love collecting technical books. That's my hobby. It's my passion. So, you know, but the reading part is, and studying, you know, you already mentioned this, the studying, not just reading, but the studying part and the mastery part.
Yes.
That's the hard part, you know, the hard part. And that's the key to this whole this whole thing. That's the key, not the purchase.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. I kind of thought that the other day when I was talking about my test and saying that I passed it, and they're like, "Oh, congrats, you passed your test." Or I'd talk about it, and they're like, "Oh, it's just a test, whatever." I said, "Do you know how much work I'm putting into this? Like how much time and energy is going into this? It is not just a test. It is not just it." I don't know. There's just so much more going behind all the work that I put in, or all of us put in, that no one really sees, and they tend to forget. It's not, oh, I'm just going to become an engineer, and they just see the title. So there's a lot of work behind this. There's so much being put into this that is invested over time. That gets us to this point.
Don't worry, you'll get a payoff in the form of paychecks.
Yeah.
I mean, I promise you, you will get, and we'll do a video at that point in time, because, and I can say that, like, I can't say that with everybody, right? I get a lot of emails and I don't know them. I don't see their work. I'm like, I can't make any projections about you. I haven't seen your work ethic. I haven't seen your persistence. I've seen you. For you, I have seen. So that's why I can say, and I know the market, right? I've seen your work over years, and I know the market. You're gonna do great. You're gonna do great. So no hesitation to make that proclamation. So I think sometimes,
Awesome.
yeah, there's like studying in a vacuum and all that. Like, what's the point? What's the goal? Is it an intellectual exercise? Yeah, I'm glad that if it's an intellectual exercise, but as I said before, our curriculum has a goal, has a purpose, and you know,
Sometimes you
it's
forget
going to
we're
be
in the
worth it.
weeds. Yeah.
If it's not worth it, then you should do that other, whatever other shorter path, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's worth it. After 3 years, yeah, for sure. I would have done something else probably, but I would not have spent 3 years doing this. But yeah, I've
Yeah,
grown
you
so
enjoy it. And
much.
this is, guess what? When you finish capstones, more of the same, except you get paid.
Yes.
Right? It's more of the same. So you should enjoy it, right? It's just like,
Oh
if you
yeah, I
hold my
love
breath for
it.
3 months and I hate it, well, what's going to happen when you get a job?
Yeah.
Right? That's your
Every
career.
day. Yeah.
Yeah, you better enjoy it, better learn to enjoy it, better learn to work, at a pace that you can, and you can sustain over a long time, right? So
Yep. Okay, yeah, so that's all the questions I have for Chris today. We talked about a lot of stuff. It was so interesting to learn about all these things from you, and just really fun to chat with you. I love having conversations with you. So thank you so much for doing this, Chris.
yeah, no problem. Thanks for having a channel. Thanks for making these videos, and yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks. Cool. I hope you guys like that too. So I guess that's it for this one. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.
All right, bye.